Hi everybody, how are we doing today? Welcome to Bourbon Over Headlines, where your headlines are served neat. Today, we're going up north. We're going to the northeast. We're going to Montpelier. Yes, we are continuing our capital series. If you're a new subscriber, a new viewer, what I'm going to do occasionally is I'm going to do 2 or 3 episodes in a row on state capitals, because state capitals are fascinating to me. They're not normally the largest city in that state. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're the largest city in the state, but often they're not. And you get stories from all over the place in the paper, because everybody goes to the state capital from all over, people visiting from everywhere, so they want to read about themselves. So you get stories from everywhere in the paper, local, national. It's amazing what you can find in state capital papers. So today we're going to Montpelier, Vermont. Population-wise, the smallest state capital in the country, in the 50 states. Current population is only 8,000 people, just over 8,000 people. The population in the 1920s was just over 7,000, so it's gone 1,000 people in 100 years. Think about that. 100 years, 1,000 people have come in and out. Net growth of 1,000 in 100 years. Yes, it is by far the smallest population state capital in the entire country, and one of the smallest states in the country. And also today, I'm filming this the day before Memorial Day in the U.S. So, to all the veterans, to all the families who died serving our country, events who died while serving and after they're serving, thank you for your service. I could not be doing this today without your sacrifice. Now, with that being said, we're going to do something. Normally I don't do this, but because it was Memorial Day weekend when this is coming out, Montpelier, really interesting. It's also Vermont, but mostly the Montpelier has 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 Medal of Honor winners in the area. Now, all of them are from the American Civil War. So John C. Clark, John W. Clark, Dayton P. Clark, not related, spelled 2 different ways. One has an E, one doesn't. So John W. Clark is C-L-A-R-K. Dayton P. Clark is C-A-C-L-A-R-K-E. We have Robert Coffey, Stephen Thomas, and William Noyes. All Medal of Honor winners, which is the highest honor that a member of the United States military can get for service in a war. I believe I couldn't remember, I think all of them survived the war. If not, 1 or 2 died in the war. But they were Civil War veterans. Thank you for your service. Any living family members who are still around, thank you. Your family has an incredible legacy, a Medal of Honor winners for our country, and what they did in their service is fully appreciated. So for a state that's super small, for a state capital that's super small, that's a high quantity Medal of Honor winners. Maybe the Fat Electrician should do a story about 1 or 2 of these Medal of Honor winners in one of his stories. He doesn't do much about the Civil War yet, but maybe he should look up a couple of these Medal of Honor winners and do a story about the Montpelier 5, I guess I'm going to call them. That's a good thing. The 5 Medal of Honor winners that were in or around Montpelier, either lived there, reside there, or were born there at some point. Also, speaking of the military, going even farther back, the Marquis de Lafayette, which is a title. We know him as Marquis de Lafayette. That's not his real name. His real name is a long aristocracy French name. He visited here in 1826 as part, or 1825, 1826, as part of the 50th anniversary of the Revolutionary War. Now, Revolutionary War, great thing, broke our way our independence from Britain. Marquis de Lafayette was super important in that. Now, he was a young 19, 20-year-old aristocrat who wanted to come over and help the Americans with their cause. He was a military guy. He came from a very, very wealthy French family. Okay, he bought. In fact, here's what it is: the king of France at that time actually forbade nobility from coming to help the Americans, because he did not want it to look like, the king did not want it to look like that the French were taking sides, because the French and the British at that point did not like each other. And I think in some ways they still don't. I think they tolerate each other, but I still think the French are going, well, technically all you guys are French, because the Normans took you guys over in 1066, and so how much of you are really English? Whatever, it's a long story. The French and English not liking each other go back probably till before 1066, and especially 1066 with the Norman conquest. Which is kind of funny because the current royal family of England is German, but let's not go there. This is not about the English royal family. This is about Montpelier. And so Marquis was a French nobility, trained. He came over, money, supplies, helped out with that. Fat Electrician just did one of his videos on Peter the Giant, a 6 foot plus guy in the 1700s. I think he was 6'7" or 6'5", who was one of the Marquis de Lafayette's best friends in the U.S. when he came over. Check that video out. I might put a link in the description, probably will, to check out that video. Talks about the Marquis de Lafayette a little bit. Now, he came over, his first time he came over, helped for about a little bit, went back. When he went back, the King of France put him on house arrest. Basically said, you're confined to your mansion. What a shock. Put him on house arrest. Okay? Put him on house arrest for like 8 days, which is kind of weird. Kind of weird. For disobeying the king. So he was put on house arrest for disobeying the king. But he did, even during that time before he came back over, he worked with Benjamin Franklin. He worked with other American diplomats to get the French to send troops and supplies over. Up to 6,000 French troops, highly trained French troops, along with a general to lead them, a major or officer to lead them, Rochambeau. No, not the game, okay, not the game, just the guy's name is Rochambeau, okay. So that helped. Then he came back over towards the end, during the Yorktown campaign, helped out at Cowpens in Yorktown towards the end of the war. After the war, he went back across, of course, he went back home, helped with the French Revolution, but also he opened his house, he opened his properties to any American who wanted to come to France. They could stay on his properties. He welcomed any and all Americans to come. He said that, like, if you guys want to come over, you're more than welcome to stay on my lands and my property. I love the Americans. You guys are great. During the French Revolution, of course, nobility was bad. They took his lands away. Napoleon gave him his lands back, gave him most of his lands back as a country. He died in 1834. After Napoleon, died in 1834, probably a rich man going, what in the hell happened to my country in France? I wanted America for a revolution. Came over here, tried to help the revolution out, tried to take down the monarchy, and then we had Napoleon, and then finally the French in 1834 was not the greatest thing in the world. He's probably going, what did I do? Is that one revolution worked, the other one really didn't. They went back to kings. It was that whole thing about French Revolution and how all that, that's not this podcast. If you want to learn about mainland Europe in the late 1700s, early 1800s leading up to the World War I, there's plenty of podcasts out there for that. This isn't it. But he did visit Montpelier as part of his tour for the 50th, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the American Revolution. So now the first permanent settlement in Montpelier was 1871. The first city charter was 1894. It was renewed in 1898, 1900, and 1912. Okay, and because of where it's at, it's on a couple of rivers. It's sort of in a valley. It's prone to flooding. It's had major floods. One of them was 1927, where now, again, my overseas people, I'm not converting this to meters. I'm not converting this to, but 7 inches of rain fell in a 6-hour period. It's a lot of rain. I don't care where you are. That's a lot of rain in 6 hours. Outside a monsoon season, outside a monsoon place in Southeast Asia, in the United States or in Europe, 7 inches in 6 hours is a lot of rain. That caused major flooding. It was $400 a person back then. I believe that equaled about right around 6,000, just under 6,000 people per person in today's dollars. I think that was 2022 dollars when I read the article. 2022, when I read it up, it had done it in 2022, so it was 2022, so it's probably even over 6,000 today. So 6,000 per person to help clean up the flood. So that's a lot of money today. That $400 back then was a lot of money in 1927. Also, I found interesting. Because of the water, because they were located in the rivers, they had one of the first hydro-powered systems that that powered all their electric streetlights in the city from really early on. So they didn't use, like you hit the old stories, the old tones, like the gas lighter light and the streetlights. They used hydroelectric power, which is very unique and very interesting. They used the resources around them to do it. So during the 1920s, which we're focusing on the 1920s right now, if you're wondering why I'm not doing the 30s or whatever, I'm going to do that. I'm just right now focusing on the 20s because the 20s, when I was doing my research, seemed to be most interesting. It's because in the 30s, it's a lot of stuff about the Depression and people suffering and people all that. Yes, there's still weird and interesting things, but I don't want to be a channel that brings everybody down. I want to be a channel that finds interesting stuff and comments about it. And 1910s, and also the 1920s, depending where you go, smaller towns tend to have more interesting stories because they have to have something to fill their paper. So they find the interesting stories. Like I've done stories about guys standing on their head in a building to thank them for showing them the city. Really weird what you find in papers. Okay. Newspaper reporter interviewed the guy, interviewed everybody else, guy still on his head. Check it out. That's my Tampa episode, by the way. If you want to learn about Tampa, one of the stories in there is about a guy standing on his head on an 11-story building. They had several mayors because at this time, the mayors were 1 to 2 years at a time, at the most 3. So mayors kept rotating in and out quickly. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mayors from 1920 to 1929. So 10-year span. It's about 2 years. 3 of them served 1 year. 3 of them served a single year. The others, one served 3 years. The other served, so multiple mayors. That's what I got. That's all the research I can find with mayors. Sometimes trying to find mayors of cities during this time frame is hard because either the records were lost or they changed from a certain county system to another one where they didn't really have mayors. It was run by the city council. So, but to begin with the stories, which is what we all came here to do, right? Listen to the stories from the papers. The first one is this. Since it is Memorial Day weekend and people tend to go out, spend some time with their friends, have cookouts. Sometimes we go by ourselves, even if we're married. Sometimes we go by ourselves. Sometimes we have friends that are the husband's friends, sometimes they're friends with the wife's friends. Sometimes there's girl nights, doesn't matter. But, doesn't matter who you are, for all you wives out there, don't shoot your husband just because he wonders why you're out so late. And if he scolds you a little bit for being out late, don't shoot him. Headline: shot husband for finding fault about late hours. John Prickett of Lackawanna was shot twice in the back. She couldn't even face him. Earlier, and probably will die. So he will die. The police are holding his wife on an open charge because it could be attempted murder, it could be murder, we don't know yet. Mrs. Perrick told the policeman who heard the shots and ran into Perrick's soft drink place. So, guy ran a business. Cop was probably nearby doing his normal patrol. That she shot her husband because he had been scolding her for being out late. So, if your husband asks you why you're out late, don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him because he's questioning why you're out late. He's probably worried why you're out late. He's probably making sure you're okay or whatever. Just don't shoot him. This happened in the 1920s. I'm surprised we don't get more stories about this today. Wife shoots husband because she got scolded for being out late. CNN at 9 o'clock. Anderson Cooper reports. I'm surprised we don't hear more about that. Today on Sean Hannity, the epidemic of wives shooting their husbands because the husbands question why they're out late. Is it an epidemic? Is it a time? Is it a sign of the times? Is it just society wanting women to be independent? Find out today on Sean Hannity. That would be today's stuff. But it happened in the 1920s. Now, to piggyback on that, to parallel with that, when you're married, or you're in a serious relationship, we have in-laws. Okay? Now, again, it's Memorial Day. We tend to hang out. Sometimes we hang out with family at a cookout. And because of that, sometimes we have to, keep our mouth shut. Keep our mouth shut. Or temper what we want to say. Especially around that old trope. How many movies have been made about the evil mother-in-law? Well, apparently a mother-in-law got sued. Mrs. Woodhouse makes complete denial. This is in Burlington, which is in Vermont, nearby. Everything is close in Vermont. Vermont's not that big. Mary Woodhouse, basically what's happening is that the mother-in-law is being sued by the couple, claiming that she purposely and willfully did actions to break up the marriage. Now, I've heard of a lot of things. I've heard of people not liking their mother-in-laws, but I don't think I've ever remember, even in today's times, maybe I'm wrong, so much news happens, that someone actually sued their mother-in-law for stuff that breaks up the marriage and prevents the happiness. Now, again, you got movie tropes, you got TV series, characters built around the evil mother-in-law who doesn't like the daughter or doesn't like the son, depending which mother it is. And they want to do everything they can to make sure that that other person's not good enough for their kid. And so they want to do everything possible to break them up. That's a movie trope. Maybe this is where it started from, where this got sued. They actually sued the mother-in-law. It's the son's mother. The daughter is suing the mother-in-law, saying that she broke up the marriage. She denies. She denies doing anything. She claims that the daughter claims that the mother-in-law wasn't happy because the daughter-in-law was claiming that her husband didn't do enough work or didn't have enough status, and the wife is going, I wouldn't care if he worked on a ditch. I love the guy. If he dug ditches, as long as he's providing. So it seems like, I don't know, she completely denied it. Is there a verdict here? I don't see a verdict here. But I don't know if they settled. But she got sued for basically maliciously trying to break up a marriage. Mother-in-laws can't live with them, can't live without them, right? It's just really interesting that we have that trope now in movies and sitcoms and everything about the mother-in-law, the evil and wicked mother-in-law. I guess it's been around for 100 plus years. No one likes the mother-in-law. Now, on a completely different subject, we have a hunger strike. Another hunger strike was started at breakfast today by 25 radicals held deportation proceedings on Ellis Island. They told waiters that they would refuse to eat until the government either released or deported them. The first hunger strike of radicals was instituted by those deported on the Beaufort, which is a ship. It collapsed after a few meals had been refused. Okay, so this is completely relatable. I don't know if this isn't going to, but immigration is a hot topic in today's world. There is way far right, way far left, and there's the middle. I'm not going to tell you what my personal views are because you don't need to know that. It's not why we're here. But immigration is a big view, and Ellis Island, for generations, was because a lot of the people coming in were from Europe and were from over the Atlantic Ocean. So they came in on boats through Ellis Island. We made sure they had the proper paperwork. We made sure that they had no diseases. We made sure they weren't quote unquote radicals. They weren't coming to be subversive, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where there were more violent elements of multiple, like more violent socialists, more violent communists, more violent anti-royalists. Radicals back then tended to be more violent. Hence, World War I started by a violent group of people who assassinated the Archduke, who was probably their best friend when it came to what they wanted, but doesn't really matter. But millions of people came through Ellis Island. I'm sure, depending from where you're from, you had people that came through Ellis Island. If they came through the time Ellis Island was open. If your family is here before that, no. But if your family came through the time of Ellis Island, which is mostly the 1800s, I think it was open for like close to 100 years, mid to late 1800s to the early 1900s, your family came through Ellis Island. You could still go to Ellis Island, look at it. It's not functioning as an immigration point anymore, but they would go through and actually make sure your paperwork was right, make sure the name matched, make sure you didn't bring any disease, make sure based on your name, based on reports we had, that you weren't part of any group that we thought would come in and undermine democracy or undermine American ideals. We did all that. Seems like today in immigration, I don't know what side you're on, I don't care, but it just seems like we need something like that today, where we have a single checkpoint where you can come in, we check, verify, do everything, make sure you're going to come in, be protected member side, you don't carry any diseases, you don't have a criminal background, you're not a radical. It seems like that would be something today that would work, that would solve immigration issues today. Now, whether we're going to do that, I don't know, but Ellis Island seemed to work for years, for generations, and it doesn't seem to matter to me. But so these radicals, as they called them, either wanted to be reported or released. So they either be released in the country or deported. They wouldn't eat until they did. They said this is the second time this happened. Another group of radicals was done, but they collapsed after a few. So they just basically ate until they collapsed, and then at that point you're in the hospital and they're going to feed you anyway. So I think that's kind of super relatable today with the immigration we have. As I said, I'm not here to do my personal views. I'm just saying Ellis Island, the system we had there seemed to work really well. Maybe something like that today would work. I don't know if we can pull it off, but I'm just saying. They had immigration, they had people doing hunger strikes, had people doing stuff coming in back then. And we have immigration issues today. So what comes around goes around. They say history repeats itself. We're finding that out again today. So I got two more stories for you. One is a fire. Seems to be a lot of fires. As I said, cities burnt down, a lot of fires. There's a lot of things that they hadn't burnt down, they hadn't been upgraded, were made of wood. Okay, back then, as they might have built around it, they had the initial wood structure, they might have put concrete and everything around it to resecure it, but the inside, like most of your houses, are probably wood. The 2x4s or whatever inside is probably wood. That's so. But these were buildings of wood, and sometimes they burnt down. They rebuilt with brick and concrete, and it didn't burn down again. So this is not. This is from Springfield, Massachusetts. Again, New England. It's all connected, pretty much. Vermont's small. This isn't from Boston. This is Springfield, which I think if you take the Amtrak up to Montpelier, you go through Springfield. Fire which destroyed waiting room in the north side of Union Station. How many Union Stations are there? There's a lot of Union Stations. I think there's one in Chicago, one in New York, one in Springfield, one. There's a bunch of Union Stations. It just must be either near to a union or it's a unified station where everybody comes together. This is from the 28th, November 28th, so just around Thanksgiving. It said last night, so this happened the 27th. A cigarette caused a fire. Well, cigarettes have caused fires. It happens when you put a spark to something that's flammable. It starts a fire, people. But But this cigarette was thrown down a grating, so apparently they didn't put it out. You ever seen a person with a cigarette and just toss it on the ground? Well, this one went through a grating. So if it's not going through a sewer where it's hitting water, if it's a grating, even if it doesn't, if it hits it, there's paper down there and it catches the paper, there could be a fire. In this case, they hit a grating that went down to a storage room, that went into a vault for storage purposes under the floor, and it caught fire. So it was, the police were involved. The entire waiting room will have to be rebuilt. They're probably gonna have to build a whole new terminal. So I wonder if that terminal's still around today. Because if they built it right, it should be. But cigarettes cause the fire. There's a shock and a half. So if you do smoke, whether it's a cigarette or a cigar, please put it out properly. Because in the words of Smokey Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. Or only you can prevent fires. So let's heed the words of Smokey Bear. Especially this weekend, we're out camping. Maybe we're out camping, maybe we're out in the woods, camping with our family, having cookouts. Let's make sure we don't catch anything on fire by tossing our cigarettes or tossing our ashes out without them being completely out. Okay? Now, the last story of the day. So, this is the early 1900s. Railroads are still, in many ways, king of the transportation, especially carrying goods. And a lot of times people, especially to rural areas, roads didn't go out there. If they did, they were horrible roads, and a lot of times the cars couldn't get, we didn't have four-wheel drive cars in the 1920s, okay? So railroads and rail cars were still a major way of getting people from point A to point B. New York City subway, same difference, it's basically an underground railroad. So this is an interesting story in my opinion. So this is from England, London. This is reporting from London, so this is an AP story. So the Associated Press is a press agency that releases stories, and if you're a part of the Associated Press, if your paper is, or your organization, you can pick up that story and post it on your site, on your paper, on your website, if it's today's world. United Press is the same thing. They gather stories from all over the world and allow you, if you're a member of the Associated Press, to use that story in your paper. That's how that works. That way news can be spread very quickly, very cheaply, it might be free. I don't know what the Associated Press, if there are any. I don't know. I'm not in the press. So it came out that the Great Western Railway, which published in the Great Western Railway, that in 1904, the Great Western Special from Plymouth to London attained an overall speed exclusive of stops of 66 miles an hour, and at times the journey exceeded 102 miles an hour. Now imagine going 102 miles an hour, excuse me, being pulled on a train, I don't know if there was passengers, on a train 102 miles an hour in 1904. Okay? Not now, where we have high-speed trains that you barely feel it. This is 1904. This is a locomotive where you feel it on train tracks. Average 66 miles an hour over the trip, exceeding speeds of 102. This is probably a coal-fired boiler. You're shoveling coal in there in 1904. This isn't like a motor, like an electric. This is probably a steam engine. This is a steam locomotive. You have people just putting coal in there, getting that thing super hot, doing all that. The speed was officially recorded, but the company, for some reason, didn't announce the accomplishment. I don't know why, but they published this. They found out about it 20 years after the fact. They finally published it. But I think that's astonishing that you're talking about Back to the Future. Remember Back to the Future, was it part 2 or part 3? Part 3, was it? Part 3? The one where they used the train, I think it was part 3. Where they had to get the train to 88 miles an hour to push the car over the gap. Maybe they needed this train. Because this train got to 102. Maybe this train would have got you to 88 really quickly. They needed to use this train instead of using the train they did. That's all the stories I have for you. I have one really interesting fact about Montpelier, according to Today. And I found this up. Now, we talk about getting away. Well, we're gonna get away from everything convenient. Montpelier, in the city limits. Think about this. We always say, well, certain stores are Starbucks are everywhere, McDonald's are everywhere, certain places are everywhere. There is no Starbucks and no McDonald's in Montpelier. So if you want to move to a place that has no Starbucks and no Montpelier and get away from all that consumerism and commercialism about Starbucks being in every corner, there isn't a corner where there's a Starbucks or a McDonald's. So with that being said, until next time, please drink responsibly and remember, always be neat.